there, it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today we are going to take apart a pair of jeans and repurpose the denim into a bag. I just wanted to show you what else you can do with repurposed denim. I made this coat with jeans too. I mixed in a few different tones of denim and did some top stitching and fitted everything together. And the front too, I pieced it together, and you can see this is the back pocket and the label, and on this side there's another back pocket. So I pieced all this together. I used the actual denim jeans little belt loops here, and added on some buttons and some really heavy lining. It's quite a warm coat actually. We are not going to make a coat today. That might take a bit of time, but we are going to take apart some jeans and make a bag. So get yourself a pair of jeans that you can use, and I'll show you some of them here. This was a man's large size, and I didn't have to do very much to it because this pocket is perfect. Fits perfectly on my Tessa, and it's great for shoving stuff in. The back of it was just top stitching and piecing together, and the front of it I put on some embroidery, applique, and some jewels. Now this Tessa, this one has the same top stitching and piecing together, except I put on some more applique on this one and beading and jewels. So gather up your denim and some lace and some beads and jewelry, and we can make one for ourselves. Now some of them, the Tessa bag has like 5 options for pockets inside. So I only picked one for the inside of this one, but it's your choice. You can pick a few of the options. So there's a pattern that follows along that has all the strap options and the pocket options. And there's a video that's a sew along for the Tessa too. And I'll leave those links down below so you can learn how to make your own bag. And we're going to mostly be sticking with how to repurpose the denim to make your Tessa. This one I see has a slip pocket for my phone inside and a zipper pocket. Now one side has applique put on and some jewelry, and the other side just has the applique put on. I used my hardware heavy strap for this one, and there are instructions in the pattern and in the Tessa sew along video on how to make this. And this was all pieced together with denim too. This is the waistband, and I used these special strap ends that I have a pattern for too in the shop, and these strap ends take like a 1 inch or 1.5 inch or 2 inch wide strapping and puts it down into a 1 inch wide hardware. Or you could do it straight across, 2 inches to 2 inches hardware, right? There's lots of options with these strap ends, not just what you can see here. So anyway, I guess we might as well get started sewing, taking apart those jeans. So to start my Tessa bag with repurposed jeans, the first thing I do is I make the linings. So the construction order's a bit changed just because I want to concentrate on the repurposing the denim for the outside layers. So I finish off the inside layers how I like to have them. So you can find how to do the inside layers when you're looking at the regular Tessa video, which I'll link down below. But I've got the pockets done. So these are finished and are just waiting for our outside layers to be done. I've got a pair of jeans here just to show you how they get cut. Run them through the wash, make sure they're clean. If there's any really dirty spots, you know, cut them out so that you can avoid them when you're working. Faded is okay. If you end up with a big huge hole, you know how ripped jeans, You can always sew a patch over top of it. It doesn't have to be a denim patch. It could be a patch using even your lining material. Patches are allowed. So to start cutting, I cut up here. This is the inside seam, and I like to leave, you know, about a ½ inch when I'm cutting, so that if I wanted to use this as a cord or a handle or anything, I've got some space here where I can fold it over and then, you know, make it so it's not fraying or rough. Although fraying and rough is a great thing to have when you're repurposing denim, because it just makes it have more character. But for now, I just cut up the inside seam and leave some space. I don't cut up the outside seam because it's got that, well, this one doesn't, but sometimes it's got that double stitching on it, and it makes it look kind of fancy. So there, now I've got a big piece that I can use. And you can take your, well, here I'll use this as a pattern piece. Pretend that this is my pattern piece. If you want, you can use this straight as it is, right? You can just cut your outer layer out right along here and use this, right? You can put some embellishments on here and make it fancier again. That's up to you. But I'm going to show the one with the strips put together, so I will be cutting this into strips. But if you want to stop right now, you just cut out your pattern piece using a pant leg, and that ends up being very conservative with your materials too, because the strips actually use up a lot of your denim. You can decide whether you want this in the center or off center, because now you've got a seam here. Or if your piece is small enough, you can, I think the cell phone one might fit in this little space here. Or maybe your piece fits in this little space here, so you also can use just the denim. It's up to you. I am not going to do this. I'm going to make strips, so we'll continue on making strips. The next place I cut to salvage the denim is up the back seam. I'm not going to cut through this because I might use this for a strap or something yet. So I'm not going to cut right through the waistband. I'm going to be very careful with the pockets, because these I can use just like we showed. If you place your pattern piece on here and it fits in this person's size of jean, then you've already got a pocket built in. So we don't want to ruin this. So I'm going to make a square piece from here, and that I'm going to save. So for now, let's cut around the waistband. I always try to cut these things up, keeping in mind that I don't know what I'm using it for yet. Okay, so I keep a lot of it intact still. Now when it comes to the zippers, I actually pick them out. Sometimes these are really good zippers. So I will pick out this zipper and save it along with the waistband that I save. And then after the zipper's out, this will all fall apart and I can cut across here. But I don't want to cut straight across here because I'll ruin the zipper. I want to keep as much zipper as I can. Now let's save these pockets on the back here. So I want to have this top edge be level with anything I do in the future. So I don't think I can, well, I might be able to fit. That's about 2.5 inches lined up there. So I will cut on that line. And then make it square. If I have 2.5 up here, maybe I should put 2.5 down here. And then I'll have some good space here. I can measure it after and see how much I have. That makes 10.5 inches, which is a pretty good size. Oh, let's do 11. There, that'll be 11 inches long. Now let's go across this way. Nice and square again. And that's how I save the pockets. The pockets are really precious because you've got your work done for you here and now. If I was using this for a bag, I would stick some decorations on here just because that's what I like to do. If you find this part here is too thick for you in here, if you pick this out, you'll be able to get rid of that other layer that you cut off. So that's what I'm going to do to both sides of the pockets. Put that aside, I'll keep that. You can do it to the front pockets too, but it sacrifices the waistband a little bit because I cut through here to get the front, but I can still save this front pocket. It just ends up being a bit smaller, and we do the same method. Then you'll get this nice old curve and the lining underneath. And it can be done exactly the same way. But then after you do it, because I cut the waistband, you'll have to sew this down. Or stick a rivet in it and make sure it stays. Let's go to the bottom. And this is where we're going to make our strips. I was going to bring this to you. This is a strip of cork that I can also sew in when I'm making my bag. I like having them 2 inches wide. So if this strip ends up being 2 inches wide, I can use it. So I'm going to save this and sew it into my bag. So now to make our 2-inch strips, I like going this way. I can see this is not quite straight. Don't trust your bottom hem to be straight because it has been washed a few times. I usually go this way to find out what's straight by the side seam. Let's get a straight line up here. And I'm making sure that my first line is perfectly lined up with my seam. Now I don't go all the way up here because I'm going to start, this is straight, but way up here, you're going to lose too much. So I would stop about here. And go across that way. Because eventually that straight line we just did is going to end up here, and we're going to be losing too much fabric. So I reposition as I go up the pant leg. Now we can make 2-inch strips along here. And again, this can be taken off and straightened out because we don't need that. When we're sewing our strips together, we won't want that. So I'm going to pick this off with my seam ripper and use this strip. Now, if you have enough lined up here that it's bigger than your pattern piece, then that's good. Because even though it's 2 inches wide, 1/2 inch on each side is going to be seam allowance, so you're only using 1 inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So all these strips will only add up to 7 inches. So we need whatever this length is. So I'm going to need some more strips, but I've got more jeans sitting here and I can cut more strips. So I can even use these strips here from another pair of jeans. The part that I like the best about this is all these jeans are a different color. You can really notice it with this one. So if you throw in a couple, just like a jigsaw puzzle, they're all going to be a different color. I think I've got some light ones here and some dark ones. So that's how we cut our pieces to get our strips. So a 2-inch strip will give you a 1-inch wide band. So I showed you how we save the pockets in the front and the back. I'm going to cut all this up into strips. You can make them as long as you want and sew the strips together, or you can keep it, you know, if you have a big pair of jeans, you can keep it as a 12-inch square. Maybe that works for some bags. But I do like to cut all this up into something so that when I feel like making something out of denim, I have all my pieces ready. Like they're all clipped together and I'm ready to go. So I finished. So these are all the strips that I salvaged off the pant legs. These are 2 inches wide. If I make a 1/2-inch seam allowance, it'll take it down to 1 inch wide. If I make a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then of course it'll be 1.5 inches. So it's up to you, right? The other thing is my jeans have stretch, so I'm going to sew carefully and then put a stabilizer on the whole thing after I'm finished, but I'll show you that later. You can do your strips this way, because sometimes there's no, well, see, this pair has stretch both way, but sometimes there's no stretch going vertically, so you might avoid your denim stretching, but I'm not too concerned about it, so I can live with the stretch. I saved the waistband because I might be able to make a handle out of it. I saved the zipper. I saved the pockets. There's 2 back pockets and 2 front pockets, and to use these all I have to do is tack this down so that it doesn't move when I'm trying to sew it together. Same here, tack this down. When I come to these kind of pockets, I trimmed this really close, and this is going to be the top, and I would put this on top of something like this. So if this was my piece squared off nicely for my bag, this pocket would be sewn on nicely, and then I would leave this edge rough like this. Now when we're sewing it on, if you can double it over, you can do that. If you want to leave it straight like this, not double it over, and just sew a ribbon on top of it, it will hide the fraying, or you can just sew it on and leave the fraying. It's up to you, whatever you like to do. And the other thing I save is labels. Either I keep them on when I'm making the bag, or I actually take them off and use them somewhere else. So let me show you how much is left over from that pair of jeans. This is what I'm going to throw in the garbage. Now then again, you might, some people use this as stuffing for toys, or those poofy footstools that they sew up. I don't make that sort of thing, so I do throw this out. Now for decorating our handles, I've got cording. These are a bunch of those doilies that you could use. I've got a whole bag here. It's got some tablecloth embroidery that could be sewed on. And I would probably cut it down to the size I wanted and nicely fold the edges over and sew it on to my bag. And I've got all sorts of, oh, this came off somebody's outfit. I could sew that on. I've got a bunch of ribbons here. I like that. I think I might put that one aside. And there's more. Oh, I found a leather strap. I spend a lot of time checking secondhand stores, and I cut the goods off of bags that are old and falling apart. When it comes to this is brand new, but this is the sort of thing I would put on this side to, after I iron this, to hide the edges, the ugly edges of something. Or fold it over and sew this on top. And it would hide the ugliness that's inside. And then you have a nice strap on one side and braid on the other side. When it comes to this stuff, I used this just as is. I just sewed it on. Made it kind of a lace over top of the denim. With this one, I cut out really generously around what I wanted, like the bird or the flowers. And then I sewed the flowers on and trimmed away the rest. And same with this one. I cut out the flower that I wanted. Where is it? There's one. And I sewed it on, and then I trimmed off everything that wasn't flower. We have some nice ribbon here, and buttons, and jewelry. You can put this on and sew it on, and I hand sew it on. And here's this, you could sew on too. So there's all sorts of things you can use to decorate. Now that I've got all this out, I have to decide what I'm going to use to decorate. But I really like this, so I think I'm going to put this on. So I've picked out what I want to decorate my Tessa bag with. So let's make some strips. Now, like I said, we want to recreate this piece with strips. And the amount of seam allowance we use is going to mean that we have to have a bit more strips than just the obvious amount. I have found some dark denim, so I just put this along here and see if I like how it looks. And I can start sewing them together. I do like that staggered look, but also I could put a bit like this too, like sew that together. So plan out how you want to have things sitting, and realize too that you're going to be covering this up with some decorations too. But I think if I alternate like that, I might be happy with it. One solid and a different color, solid, different color. I should move it. I like it consistent. So this will be solid and this will be mixed with a different color. Like that. And I'll go through and stick it together like that. When we're sewing these things together, it's right sides together. And you can use a 1/4 inch seam allowance if you want to have more of your strips showing. Depends on your sewing machine and, you know, whether you can get close to the edge. If you're worried about it fraying, you can always sew it through and then zigzag it afterwards. And you can use a 1/2 inch seam allowance too if you like. So I think maybe I'll try it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and see how it looks. And I really only have to sew as wide as this. So I'm going to cut this off. This is all extra. Maybe to be on the safe side, I'll just have it a little bit overlapped. And then that way I can test if this is cut square. I know this is cut square because it followed this here. But when I give it over to this side, it might not be square. So I should do it square. But I'll do it square after I sew it together. So I'm going to sew all these strips together with these ones here before I sew them lengthways. I just sew them together the same way here. And then I always spread the seam allowances open iron them. They'll be flatter. Now for my actual sewing, I do have a 1/4 inch foot here that I can sew the 2 layers together uniformly. And I also have a jeans needle. It's a 14 for this because this is really light. If I had something heavier, I might get a 16 jeans needle. I do have regular, right now it's regular Gutermann in here. I have a top stitching thread that I'm going to top stitch with afterwards. That's exactly the same as the regular Gutermann that I have in here. And for this, I don't think I need any special heavy duty thread. The top stitching is good. So here we have it. I have to go over and press it all down because we want to top stitch these flat, and I also want to put interfacing on the back of this to stabilize it. So there's a lot of pressing that comes next, but let me, look how those ended up staggered. That was an accident. I deliberately did dark and light and dark and light, and I found out this didn't stretch as much as this, the light blue. So if you're ever doing it and you have a stretchy and mix it with a not stretchy, it'll help stabilize the stretchy too. Anything to see on the other side? I made sure I put these facing the same way so that there wouldn't be a big knot underneath here. We want to try and keep this as flat as possible. And this one has some long pieces on it. But they all basically cover our pattern piece. Now, after I press it and put some interfacing on top of it, I'm going to draw the pattern piece on here and trim it down. But first, let's get it all flat. What we are trying to do is put all these pieces together to make a piece of fabric that we can use for the back and the front. Did you remember to make 2? Because you will need 2, one for the back and the front. This ends up being the base for your design, where I could put on buttons or lace or something like that. But let's get this pressed and stabilized, and then we can top stitch. So I will change to, well, I've already got a 1/4 inch foot on there. I might change to that other foot, stitch in the ditch, so I can have an 1/8 top stitching. I'll just take a look and see what it looks like. And I will change to my top stitching thread so it's really noticeable on here. So just to show you, this is my 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do a 1/4, you can do a 1/2. I pressed it very nicely so it's really flat. And as you can see, it's the wrong size, but we'll work on that. I have another piece here that I put the interfacing on the back of it so it makes it a bit stiffer. And this is pressed nicely too. And the interfacing is on the back. I measure out interfacing to the exact size of my pattern piece. And then when this is really pressed well, I put the interfacing on. I'm going to cut off the extra, and I'm going to zigzag around so that this doesn't fall off, because I really like to have some stiffness to this, and this does add some stiffness. Then after, I can top stitch on both sides of my seams, and I'm going to zigzag around the other outside too. So I finished my top stitching. I ran out of thread at one spot. I don't know where it is now, because when I do run out of thread, I pull the ends. Yeah, right there. I pull the ends through and I tie a knot right there. And I tie a knot on the other side, and then when I start almost in the exact same spot again, and I tie that knot on the other side too. So if I have more of the top stitching thread, then I'm saved. I did change things up when I was sewing. I decided I had these strips of cork that matched really nicely. So I took off one row of jeans and I put on one row of this cork. It's just a perfect color. I like it. And I put double rows of stitching just because I was having fun top stitching. What else was I going to say? Oh yes, I've done the D-ring tabs, just like it's in the pattern and in the video for the Tessa bag too. And they'll get sewn together and hang over like this just a little bit. And what else? Oh yeah, because this is cork, right? I don't have any interfacing on this side, right down here, but it's on all the rest of it. The interfacing helps hold everything securely, especially this stretchy stuff, because I got jammed up a couple of spots because this was stretching. But when I stick the interfacing on, it does help. So I've got the fronts and backs done. And if you want to leave it like this and just do this as your fronts and backs, you're finished with your decorating. Of course, I'm never finished with my decorating. I've got some of this really nice fabric here. It's lace, and I don't know why I bought it. I do know that the only thing I use it for is decorating things. So basically what I do is I cut out something that I want to put on. I've kind of gotten rid of the odds and ends that don't make it flow nice. There was a bunch of twigs down here I didn't like, and they'd only be hard to sew on anyway. So I took those off. So I think I'm going to put that on the back. And what I'm going to do is stay out of the seam allowances on the sides and top here where the zipper goes. And I'm going to get some regular black thread and zigzag all around this. I might use some glue, double-sided tape, something to hold it down, pins, anything. But I'm going to follow all the way through. And so I'm going to sew it on. And then after I sew it on, I'm going to, I don't have any scissors here right now. I'm going to cut right beside my sewing and cut this net off so that the only thing that'll be attached are these flowers and then the stem going to the rest of it. So I'm going to stick that on the back, and then I'll consider the back done. And on the front, I'm going to put, and I've already decided the cork's going to be on the bottom. On the front, I'm going to put this piece that I cut off somebody's t-shirt and keep it out of the seam allowances and have it sewn on just the same way. I'm going to follow around, and then when I later come to it, I'm going to cut off the black t-shirt material. And then I found this piece of jewelry too that I'm going to put on. This had a chain on it. You know, it's got this little fake jewel in the middle of it, but I'm going to put the two pieces on, and that'll be the front of my bag. So I will sew these things on, and then I'll come back. And basically after these things get on here, we'll be finished, and we can put our zipper on according to the instructions. And then we sew our bag together and do our strap. So some of this you can get from the Tessa pattern instructions, and some of it you can get from the Tessa video. So it's just up to you to pick which features you want to have. So here we have our decoration sewn on. This I sewed on by hand, and this, well, I wasn't too keen on having the t-shirt material underneath. It was kind of thick, but it was too difficult to pick this off. It, you know, being secondhand, it was pretty much stuck in there. So I put it on this way anyway, and I'm happy with how it turned out. If you flip it over, you can see this is the applique stitch on my sewing machine, and your machine might not have that, but you can use a zigzag stitch too. You'll notice I didn't go through all the cracks, but I just went around the outside because it is still attached to the t-shirt, and that's one of the bonuses about having it attached to a backing. So this is finished, and this is the other one. And I'll use this one for the back, although they're both nice. It doesn't really matter. Could use either one. This was the same thing. I sewed it on with an applique stitch, or you could zigzag. And then I cut out, you can still see some netting here. Maybe I'll take that out too. I missed a spot. Yeah, that looks like netting right there. Yep, let me show you. There, so I haven't cut that out yet. So what I do is I cut really close to the stitching that I just did, and I take this off. So I took it off everywhere else, and I forgot that spot. So I'll take this spot off too. Then, of course, I did the D-ring tabs. I might not have showed you, but it's exactly the same as the way the Tessa bag is built in the pattern, and in the video too, how it's done. I marked my seam allowances and my center marks on both sides. because next we're going to put the zipper on. And I marked my seam allowances, excuse me, my seam allowances and my center marks here too. And we're going to sandwich our zipper in between. And I've marked the center here too. So I'm going to place this, so where'd my little line go? Right there. It's invisible on one side. I can only see it on one side. So I'm going to line the centers up and leave the edges. And the way to get your zipper tabs not swallowed into your bag and not rumpled up, and to get nice corners on your pouches or your bags or anything you're making, is to make sure that you don't sew on these zipper tabs when you're sewing your seam allowance. So if you have your seam allowance here and your zipper tab here, do not sew on this zipper tab, because then when you turn it, it's going to eat it into the bag. So what you do is, even if you're coming up with your seam allowance, this one, well, let's say 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever it is, whatever the pattern suggests, when you're doing your seam allowance, make sure you don't sew on here. So even if you're coming up here and this is here into your seam allowance, don't sew on it. Just curve off a little bit. Cut your seam allowance down maybe from 1/2 to 1/4 if you have to. Leave that space in there, because I'll show you after I sew it in. If there is a space there, then your zipper tab will pop out. But your zipper tab can't pop out if you sew it down. So don't sew it down. So I'm going to sew this zipper on and sandwich everything in between, just like it says on the pattern. And I'm not sewing that. And then after, when I get that sewed on, and you flip it back, right? And it's looking like this, and you're putting together all the pieces. This won't stay, will it? When this is sewed on and you're putting on all the other pieces, the other thing I do not do is I don't sew from one edge to the other edge. I only sew my zipper tab down. I don't go past that point. And same here. So when I'm sticking the next layer on, I get into the habit of never going past into the seam allowance. Don't sew into the seam allowance, and you'll be able to sew your bag together better so that you don't eat those zipper tabs. Stop right on the zipper tabs, and that's as far as you go. This is all demonstrated in the Tessa bag, right? And in the pattern. So don't go past those lines. Don't sew your tabs and don't go past those lines. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you know, anytime you're putting anything together, don't go past those lines, because then when you turn it out again, you'll be able to sew this part nicely. Okay, so I'm going to get it all together, and then I will show you the gap that I've got here that I'm perfectly happy with, because it'll make our zippers not get swallowed up into the sides of our bags. Okay, I've got all the fronts and backs sewn together now. Now you can see I didn't sew into the line, not with my lining, nor with my outer layer, and same with the other side, not with my lining and my outer layer. I just sewed from the tab to the tab all the time. Okay, and the first time I passed through, that's why there's double lines of sewing on here. The first time I passed through, I went close to the edge. And the second time I went through, I went more into the middle. So there's a double row of stitching. I did that because I did one side at a time, right? I only sew this side on, then I sew that side. So then I get to have 2 rows of stitching. Then it kind of feels more secure that way. Now let's open this up. There's the inside to show you. I did not sew past. You can see there's the opening right here. These are not sewn together. I didn't go from edge to edge. I just went from tab to tab all the time. And on the other side, it's the same thing. I went from tab to tab, not edge to edge. You don't have to go to edge because this is going to be sewn this way now, and that will secure everything. And this way, when we do sew it, we will not be sewing our zipper tabs, and they will stay up. And there will be a little bit of a hole in there even, which is a good thing. That's how you make your zipper tabs not get swallowed into your bag. So for now, the one thing I have to remember to do is round my bottom corners. On the pattern pieces, they're rounded, but when I'm sticking all these strips together, they don't end up rounded. So I'm going to round the corners, and after I round the corners, I can put this together, the outside layers and the inside layers. And I can open up these, and I can put my zipper tabs down so that they pop up nicely. So I will pull these down this way and match this together with this one. So match up your seam allowances here, match up your zipper tabs. This is my lining, right? So I've got my zipper tabs facing down towards my lining. I like them long so I can see that they're facing down. And after we turn it, everything will be sitting nicely up. So I'm going to start pinning and clipping and sewing. Now I have it all clipped and pinned together. If it's easier, I've got my little marks here. If it's easier, you can sew this side and stop, and then sew this side and stop. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to maneuver around, so there's nothing wrong with that. Then you go back to this side here and sew around all the way. The seam allowance here can start at the 1/2 inch and go into maybe, 5/8 or something. Just anything that's a bit more than 1/2 inch, just so that your lining is smaller than your outside layer. That's your choice. Sometimes people like to have the lining smaller so it hangs better. I do have my tabs clipped down, and they're not in the seam allowance on both sides. I have my seam allowance marked. That's what I'm going to aim for. But if I can't get close enough because of, the thickness of this tab here, don't worry about it. Take your seam allowance down to, this is a 1/2, take it down to 1/4. We can always zigzag back over it to get it reinforced. But don't sew on top of this lump here. That is your seam allowance, and don't sew on top of the tabs neither. So make sure you don't sew on your zipper tabs. Then you come down 1/2 inch here and go all the way around and up the other side and do the same again. I've got my zipper tabs and they're out of the way, and I've got the lump here. I can feel it, it's there. If I can't get close with my sewing machine, that's okay. But don't sew on your zipper tabs, because that's the way it's going to come out beautifully if you don't touch your zipper tabs. And so that means if you have to, you can cut your seam allowance from this 1/2 and just veer off. Go around the zipper tab and make it 1/4 instead of a 1/2. Whatever works. So I'm going to sew this around, and then I will turn it and I will pop it out for you and show you what the zipper tabs end up looking like. Okay, I've mostly turned it here. I did round the corners, so I sewed around the corners. I did double rows of stitching so that it has some strength to it. Another thread. And I trimmed down the seam allowances so it's not bulky inside. So this looks pretty good. Now you've won the battle if it's all sucked in this way. And then when you actually push it out, then your lining is being sucked in. That's always a good sign. And if you can stick something in there, because you left a space, you didn't sew on top of your zipper tabs. If you can stick something in there, that's a bonus too. It means you did well. So that's going to make your bag have nice corners on it. Now I am going to go press this, and I did go to 5/8 of an inch on the seam allowance here. So I'm going to press it up 5/8 of an inch and hand sew it and shove it inside, and then we can do our strap. Okay, we've finished our bag now. I did sew the bottom, and it looks pretty good inside. I am going to do the strap now because that's the only thing that's left, and it shouldn't be too difficult. I did get this from the waistband, these two pieces, and I'm going to use these. I would have left more tabs on, but they would interfere with where the fold is for the hardware. So to start off with, since this is a bit stretchy, I mean, otherwise I would have used it if it was stiffer, but it is stretchy. I'm going to line this with some of this because this is not stretchy, and so it'll hold it really well. And I will sew this onto here. Make sure it's nicely balanced in between the two. And then after, I will put a little cap on here, but I'm going to do one made out of cork. So I'm going to go with this one, and I'm going to cut it as wide as this. I'll measure it properly. And then I'm going to have it hang over a bit and just sew it right across here. And that'll make like a strap end. I could use, if I had it, some of this brass for a strap end too, but I don't have any brass strap ends, so I'm going to make one out of cork instead. So first I'm going to line this with this, and then I'm going to make strap ends for it so that it's finished off nicely. So I finished these off. I stabilized them by putting this ribbon of trim here and sewed it on the other side so the top stitching is here. I'm going to make a strap end to turn this 1.5 into 1 inch so that I can attach the 1 inch swivel hook on the end. And then on this end I'll have one that turns it into 1 inch again so that I can attach it to here. This is just like the heavy hardware strap that is in the Tessa bag pattern. And then I'm going to, I've done one side of this with cork and the other side with ribbon. I don't need strap ends because I just fold it over the end. Then I'm going to attach this here. I can hold it with a rivet. I'm going to attach the other end into, right, this will be strap. This will be the end that goes to 1 inch. Then I stick this into here. And then I feed it back through here. All this is in the Tessa bag pattern and the Tessa video. So that's how this gets attached. Then after it comes around here and it attaches to the other one. This like this. And this of course will have the adjustment here from 1.5 to 1 inch. But of course I have to make sure that I have everything facing the right way. But I will do this, make these strap ends and run everything through and attach it with my, I've got Chicago screws, and then I'll come back and show you how it's all fed through. Okay, so I've attached my swivel hooks and I use these extra large strap ends. I should share the pattern with you because I have a few of these. I sewed them on, I glued them on to keep them extra secure. I put them on the waistband of the jeans right? I had to cut off a few of the tabs because they were in the way. And then on the other side, I have more strap ends. And I sewed them on and glued them on, ran them through these rectangle rings. You can use those cross rings or round rings, whatever you like. And then I put it through the strap. And the strap has this same kind of trim on the inside as this part of the strap does. And then I sewed that up. So this is all finished now. And if you're wondering, so this was made, and this was made. And then after I did this part of it, I ran through the slider. Then I ran through one of these rectangle rings. And then I ran through the slider again. And then I ran through the rectangle ring and sewed them down. So that makes my strap all finished. So now I can put this on my bag and we'll be done. So how'd that go? Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, leave them below, or we have the Lányos Handmade Pattern Party group. I'll leave the link below and you can join that, and leave your questions on Facebook there and I'll answer them for you as best as I can. That's also a place where you can post your makes too, because I really want to see what you've done. You know, maybe you've just done the piecing like this and the top stitching. I'd love to see it. Maybe you've got some jewelry. Everybody's got access to different things, different appliques. So I would really like to see what you've made, and we can start your repurposing journey. Maybe next we'll make a coat. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.